I am recording now, and last we left off is we're at the festival, the festivities, and we're making our way to the Fire Lord. Where did I leave off? I left off right here. Oh, but first, before any of that, we are going to run into Rangi's mom, the headmistress. Hey, Ram. Okay, let's see. I'm just trying to see how much I want to read today. Okay. We will see if I get that far. And hold on. Okay. So, the next chapter is called The Headmistress. The Headmistress. Hayran's arrival was preceded by a hush through the nearby crowd. Also, before I start, well, I already started, but I might be reading just a tad weird or just a tad slower. Apparently, I had an allergic reaction to a mango I ate yesterday, and I didn't realize it until this morning. My upper lip was swollen, like I had gotten Botox, like, during the night. I was going to town on the mango, and I guess there's a substance called urushiol. Urushiol. Let me type it out. That it causes like swelling and rash. I think I spelled it right. But it causes swelling and rash, and it's highly concentrated in the peel of the mango, but it is also found in poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac. So that was and my face may or may not be a little swollen. I don't know. Yeah, I was eating the mango off the peel and then some. Good thing it was just my upper lip and not my bottom lip too. Nope, I looked like I had gotten Botox or something. I looked like a duck. And it's still kind of swollen. It's a very weird sensation where like the upper part of my upper lip sounds swollen. I feel swollen. So I might be reading a little slower tonight. The swelling has gone down immensely. But yeah. It took me a little while because I couldn't figure out what it was. Like I thought, because I have recently cut bread out of my diet, and I thought I had a little piece of bread yesterday, and then I thought, oh, maybe it's the bread. And then my mom thought it was some chapstick I thought I was putting on. But no. She was just like, wait, you had the mango. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did have that mango. And then I was just like curious, like, let's look up some mango allergy. And then right away, when I was searching mango allergies, and then one of the top searches was swollen lip, and I'm just like, ah, I see. That explains everything. So yeah, I will not be doing that again, and next time I will peel my mangoes before I eat it, because it was not pleasant. Not pleasant at all. Okay. Just to get that out of the way. If it's not one thing, it's definitely another. Okay. But we continue. So yes, the next chapter is the Headmistress. Heiran's arrival was preceded by a hush through the nearby crowd. Lower-ranked nobles parted to let the women who'd taught their daughters pass through. Some of them gave her crisp salutes, a reminder Rangi's mother had also been a high-ranking military commander at one point. She returned the gestures with glances and nods. Kyoshi swallowed hard. Even without the complications of her early adult avatarhood, this was a reunion with someone designed from the ground up to pass judgment and cull the unworthy from her presence. Heiran approached slowly, using a cane to assist her steps. She hadn't bothered with dressing in finery. The stark parade uniform she wore enhanced the deliberateness of her movements. Her once again solid black hair was mingled with strands that had turned gray and weary. She looked older. That meant finally looking at Rangi's mother, without a doubt. Yeah, that meant finally looking like Rangi's mother, without a doubt, instead of her twin. The blaze in her eyes was still there, as clear and as piercing as ever. Kyoshi bowed, if only to escape the woman's gaze for a moment. I am grateful to see you in better health, Headmistress, she said. And a little surprised, it seems, Heiran said. Kyoshi tensed up. She'd made the wrong face. Again, this is why she needed her makeup, to hide the nuances of expressions she couldn't control. Heiran brushed her own comment away. You don't have to pretend. I can't believe I'm up and about either. They're miracle workers, water tribe healers. She sighed unhappily. I can barely firebend right now, though. It's like being a child again, having to learn the basics and build my strength back up. A fitting punishment, given what I put Yoon and you through. Kyoshi winced. A firebending teacher of Heiran's caliber, losing her abilities felt like a tragic loss to the whole world. I still haven't discovered who was responsible for this crime, Kyoshi said. In her opinion, the official inspectors had dropped the case prematurely. They had found no records or messages as to why so many influential members of the Earth Kingdom had gathered in Yokia that day, but that was suspicious itself. But I swear I won't let it drop. Pain coursed through Heiran's face. Kyoshi. It was him. It was Jianzu. It took a while for the dam to give way. Kyoshi's old hatred still Kyoshi's old hatred, long stilled. Yeah, Kyoshi's hatred, long stilled, came rushing over the banks once more. She turned to Rengi, who gave her a grim nod. The victims in Yokio were his enemies, come to oust him as the Avatar's master, Heiran said. Her voice was strained and hoarse. He caught me and himself in the attempt. Whether it was out of sloppiness or to throw off suspicion, we'll never know. Kyoshi closed her eyes and gripped the handle of one of her fans. It took so long for the threads of mistakes and monstrous deeds to stop weaving into the future, just to tie themselves off and end. Maybe they never ended. A different pattern hung out of reach, one where Kelsang was alive. Heiran had never been poisoned, and Lek was still sulking in a run-down tea house in Chameleon Bay, longing for a bison. I'm sorry, Kyoshi said. If I had been able to create a flame when you tested me. Remembering her past failure in front of Heiran hurt all the more, considering how much Kyoshi enjoyed the act of firebending these days. The flames came easily now when she danced with Rangi's native element, and yet she had been so lacking back then. Kyoshi often thought about that little ball of tinder she had failed to set alight. Sometimes it drove her to tears. What could have been saved but for her weakness? I'm sorry, she repeated. Heiran laughed, a short, harsh bark. You're sorry? You're apologizing to me? The indomitable former commander began to shudder. She pressed her fingers to her eyes so hard that it looked like she was trying to gouge them out. Rangi was at her side in an instant, steadying her. The bystanders were as surprised as Kyoshi at the show of emotions, but Heiran collected herself before she shed any tears. Kyoshi had a feeling. This was the far. This was the first. Kyoshi had a feeling this was the furthest extent to the woman's vulnerability. Kyoshi, I am the one who needs to apologize, Heiran declared with nary a crack in her throat. I'm so sorry for what I did to you, and for what I allowed Jianzu to do to you and Yoon. I could have put a stop to what was happening. I could have seen things clearly if I'd wanted to see them. I can never make this right. Kyoshi looked at Rangi's hand on her mother's elbow. It was a small gesture, the slightest touch, but it made Kyoshi think of the way she had wrapped her arms around Kelsang once, and as he wept on an iceberg over his mistakes. It was hard to tell, given their stern, unyielding expressions, but here as a woman racked by guilt, being comforted and supported by her loving daughter. Your recovery is a good start, Kyoshi said. Heiran looked at her puzzled. Toward paying your debt to me, Kyoshi clarified. What I demand from you, Headmistress, is your continued good health. I'll accept no less than what I'm owed. Kyoshi, this isn't the time for jokes. She's not joking, Mother. Rangi's smile overflowed with love for them both. She's simply like that. Now swallow your pride and accept the decree of the Avatar. Heiran laughed, though there was no gladness in the sound. She patted her daughter's hand. I'm all right. Go find Sifu Atuat. Go find Sifu Atuat. I need a moment alone with Kyoshi. Rangi clipped her heels together and left to retrieve whoever this Atuat person was. Heiran gathered herself and stared down Kyoshi. How she managed to do that from her lower height was a mystery. Kyoshi, I want you to know something, she said. Heiran's voice lost what was left of its earlier emotion and turned into a cold, unflinching whisper, simply measuring and reporting the dimensions of the truth. I would kill him. I would kill him for what he did to you and Kelsang and Yoon and my daughter. I want you to know that, Kyoshi. I want you to believe it. If he were here right now, I would kill Jianzu in front of this entire crowd. The space between Kyoshi and Heiran changed like steel being quenched, hardening into an ancient and well-understood design. Her true reconciliation with Rangi's mother lay here, not in the tearful public apologies. So would I, Kyoshi said. Good girl. Heiran glanced in the other direction her daughter had gone. Rangi. Yeah, Rangi, ultimately, she is kind. No amount of drilling or hardship will ever change that about her. Which means there are places she will never go. Places that are barred to her. You may have to visit them on her behalf, to protect her and others. Kyoshi still struggled with the action she took as the Avatar in defense of the world's peace and balance. But protecting Rangi was a matter that turned her into a different being, small and rat-like and vicious enough to live inside a thin shadow. She chose her words carefully to Heiran, filling in the limits she was sure of. I know exactly what to do with anyone who would hurt your daughter. Heiran's lips flattened into a line. Kyoshi knew that this was as close to a grin of outright approval as the woman ever gave. They gazed at each other in mutual accord. The silence was broken by someone accidentally jostling Kyoshi's elbow. I couldn't remember if you liked plum wine or sorghum liquor, a short, plump woman in blue robes said to Heiran in a loud, piercing voice. She wielded a glass in each hand, threatening to spill the different colored contents. So I got both. Rangi caught up like she'd been chasing the water tribe woman around through the crowd instead of retrieving her. Kyoshi, this is Sifu Atuat, she said. Sifu Atuat is the greatest of the northern healers. She personally saw to my mother's recovery. We invited her as our honored guest in thanks. While she's here, she's part of our family. Heiran pushed the proffered glasses away from her face. And I'm still your patient, Atuat. I shouldn't be drinking. The other doctor said it would set back my recovery. The other doctors are cowards, Atuat said. If in your If your innards start failing, I can simply back I can simply bring you back to life like I did before. She turned to Kyoshi, acknowledging the Avatar for the first time. I'm that skilled, she said solemnly. It was a matter of grave importance that Kyoshi understand the facts. When the headmistress here arrived at my hospital, she was basically a corpse wrapped in a red shroud. To save her, I picked the pocket of death itself. Kyoshi had to check what Kyoshi had to check that the good doctor wasn't already drunk. She wasn't. She was just that way. You must be one of the finest benders in the world then, regardless of element. Atuat held up a finger while draining one of the glasses she'd brought for Heiran. I am, she said when she finished it. Damn. Yeah, man, she keeps things straight. Uh, you know how women in Agna you know how women in Agna aren't allowed to learn the fighting forms for waterbending? Kyoshi didn't know about what the Northern Water Tribe capital. Yeah, Kyoshi didn't know that. Yeah, Kyoshi did not know that about the Northern Water Tribe capital. But no matter. Atuwa was going to elaborate anyway. I say it's the men who aren't allowed to. I say it's the men who aren't allowed to learn healing from me. Any idiot can punch anyone with water. I punch dying people's energy pathways with water, such that they live for another handful of decades. Heiran rolled her eyes. Don't flatter her, she said to Kyoshi, with the candor that one could only have when talking about a friend. Atuat is arrogant enough without praise from the Avatar. This was astonishing. The former headmistress of the Royal Academy and the mother of Rangi calling someone else arrogant. Kyoshi looked closer at the woman who warranted such a description. Atuwa was a little younger than Heiran and resembled Auntie Mui from the neck down, but there was an edge to her. But there was an edge to her face and light blue eyes that Kyoshi found similar. Rangi noticed her trying to place it. Sifu Amat is Master Amak's sister, she explained. So that was it. Kyoshi's spirit sank. She hadn't been the slightest bit close to the mysterious ear excuse me. She hadn't been the slightest bit close to the mysterious disreputable. This word is throwing me off. Where is my phone? There is my phone. Disreputable. Disreputable. Okay, there we go. Yeah, disreputable. I just. Yeah, disreputable. Thank you. Uh, so that was it. Kyoshi's spirit sank. She hadn't been the slightest bit close to the mysterious, disreputable waterbending master, but she'd been there when he died, stabbed through the back of Tagaka, the pirate queen's waterbending. With so much blood staining her past, maybe Kyoshi really was as cursed as parts of the Earth Kingdom claimed. I'm very, very sorry. I'm very sorry about your brother, she said. Atuat sighed. Thank you. Amok was never going to have a peaceful end, to put it mildly. But he died protecting people. That's far more honorable than what he was doing before. Hiran looked like she wanted to change the subject of a Master Amok. Where's this airbender friend of yours? She asked Kyoshi and Rengi. Should I meet him? Oh, not should I meet him. I should meet him. Yeah, where's this airbender friend of yours? She asked Kyoshi and Rengi. I should meet him. Kyoshi craned her neck, trying to see where they had left Jinpa. His crowd was even bigger now, making a circle around him. The monk concentrated as his... The monk... Yeah, the monk... Not the mock. The monk. The monk concentrated as he spread his arms wide, performing an airbending feat passed down through the southern temple that levitated him a few inches off the ground without causing a storm in the vicinity. Kyoshi had once involuntarily lifted herself with a larger version while in the Avatar state, but she couldn't do it under normal circumstances. Jinpa said the party trick had supposedly been invented by Karuk. It took a lot of skill and had no practical use, so Kyoshi believed it. As he drifted back to the floor, his audience of nobles clapped for the feat. Hold on. Oh. Okay. Where was I? Okay, yeah. As he drifted back to the floor, his audience of nobles clapped for the feat in the exact same manner they'd done for the righteous music performance. Kyoshi realized that Jinpa was enjoying himself, showing off for others. He hadn't had a real break the entire time he'd been serving her. Would anyone like to try? He said, indicating he could lift a willing volunteer. Me! Atuat roared across the party. She hiked up her skirt so she wouldn't trip and marched off with haste toward the air nomad. Heiran pinched the bridge of her nose, a gesture of frustration she shared with Rengi. I swear, it's like having a sister with no impulse control, she muttered. She limped after her own doctor, forgetting to say goodbye to her daughter and the Avatar. The shocking lapse of manners from the shocking lapse of manners from the headmistress warmed Kyoshi's heart. She liked Sifu Amok. She liked Sifu Atuat and her effect on Heiran. Rengi appeared to share the sentiment. Sometimes I think making a friend cued her more than anything else, she said. Does she know about us? Of course. Wasn't that what the two of you were talking about by yourselves? Wait. Yeah. Does she know about us? Of course. Wasn't that what the two of you were talking about by yourselves? Her giving you the whole "you better treat my daughter or else" speech? Kyoshi supposed that had been a part of the conversation in a roundabout way. She decided not to mention the particulars. Avatar Kyoshi, said a deep, confident voice behind her. She turned back to see a young man swathed in regal gold and black. His hair was pulled back tight, making his large forehead more prominent, and his sharp chin was clean shaven. Finally, she arranged her features in a welcoming expression that hopefully conveyed the right amount of respect for a foreign head of state. This wasn't the introduction she had to make her. This was the this was the introduction she had to make herself, without help. Fire Lord, she said, thank you for your gracious hospitality. While she was getting ready, she'd practice over and over what she would say. From the way the crowd hushed, she could tell how many eyes were watching her. I have not been in the Fire Nation long, but I already have been awestruck several times by by the natural splendor of your country, and especially the skill of its craftsmen. Oh, so you visited the gallery then? He said, grinning. It's our national pride. There was a slight tug on the back of Kyoshi's dress. She ignored it. She was doing well right now and didn't want to lose her momentum. I did. Might I say, you resemble your departed lord. You resembled you. I did. Might I say, you resemble your departed father, Lord Shairyu, a great deal. May your reign over the Fire Nation be as glorious as his. A sharp kick to the back of her calf nearly made her buckle. Kyoshi! Rangi's voice was a strangled squeak of mortification. That's not Fire Lord Zoryu! And that is the end of that chapter. Oof. Already going on a bad start. Yeah. Okay. But then the next chapter is called Ancient History. Wait, let me just take a swig of my water first. Oof. Yeah, it's a large oof. Damn. It's okay though. She's the Avatar. She could make mistakes. Maybe. Okay. Next chapter is called Ancient History. Alright. Ancient History. The crowd had frozen. The waiters had frozen. The sun in the sky halted its arc. The celestial bodies had never seen such a colossal blunder in their thousand lifetimes of watching the Avatar. She's gonna get socially arrested by the social police. Oh, yeah. Everyone can feel it. Yeah. The crowd had frozen. The waiters had frozen. The sun in the sky halted its arc. The celestial bodies had never seen such a colossal blunder in their thousand lifetimes of watching the Avatar. I should introduce myself, said the man whom Kyoshi had mistaken for the Fire Lord. My name is Chaejin. Yeah, Chaejin. Chaejin. Yeah, my name is Chaejin. Fire Lord Zoryu is my younger half-brother. Kyoshi looked around frantically for the real Zoryu. she spotted him, hurriedly working his way through the crowd in her direction, outpacing his own guards. She confirmed it was him like she should have done the first time by checking his top knot from afar. There it was, the headpiece in the shape of a there it was, the headpiece in the shape of a five-tongued flame, decidedly not resting on the hair of the man standing before her. Kyoshi grimaced. It was as if this double had selected his appearance to cause confusion. His robes were cut to resemble the silhouette of royal armor, and the royal brocade had hung from his shoulders like a shade. Yeah, and the gold brocade that hung from his shoulders was a shade that she thought was reserved for the Fire Lord and his immediate family. Apologies for the error, she muttered. She had never heard of Jin before, and had no idea where he fell in the court hierarchy. It's understandable. Royal lineages, royal lineages can be confusing. My father was Fire Lord Sheiryu, but he never married my mother. We try very hard to hide our indiscretions here in the Fire Nation, especially to outsiders. She was too far out on a limb. She didn't know what to say when presented with delicate information like this. She glanced at Rangi for help, but judging from her panicked expression, Rangi didn't have enough rank to speak here. She'd spent all her capital already to warn Kyoshi of her mistake. Kyoshi tried to read how delicate the situation was by glancing at the faces of nearby partygoers. The normally reserved Fire Nationals looked completely aghast. The tension grew thicker and heavier until finally their little bubble was pierced by the arrival of Zoryu. Avatar Kyoshi, the Fire Lord said, leaning over slightly from exertion. The hem of his outrageously delicate robe was grass-stained, and his headpiece had tilted out of alignment in his haste to get here. Their meeting had been anything but a graceful drifting together like two leaves in a pond. Sorry. No. No. My lips are itchy. God, I'm so tense. I'm sorry. I'll keep reading. But my lips are getting very, very itchy. Like the sides of them. And I'm just like, man, this was my mistake. Okay. Back to the tenth story. Okay. Their meeting had not. Their meeting had been anything but a graceful drifting together like two leaves in a pond. Zoryu, Shaijin said. He genially slapped his brother on the back. I was wondering when you'd get here. I'd like you to meet the Avatar. She thought I was the Fire Lord. Can you imagine? Kyoshi heard Rangi second her breath sharply, and she understood why. Shaijin had stolen the right of introduction, neglected his brother's title, and improperly touched the Fire Lord, all under the guise of a friendly gesture between family members. Ah, Jesus fucking Christ. Hold on just 1 second. I'm gonna keep going, but like, okay. Hello, cuz. Okay. Um. Okay. Um. Yeah. Shaijin had stolen the right of introduction, neglected his brother's title, and improperly touched the Fire Lord, all under the guise of a friendly gesture between family members. If court etiquette was a secret language, then it was finally opening to her, arranging concepts and syllables into sentences she could comprehend. How amusing, Zoryu said. I need to talk to my guest now, Shaijin. The statement the statement could have been a warning if delivered right, but the slight crack in the Fire Lord's timbre turned it unsure and plaintive. Of course, Shaijin said. You must have wanted to discuss the recent crop failures or the precipitous declines of the fisheries. If there's anyone who would reverse our country's recent fortunes, it's the Avatar. Fuck, dude. Oh my god. And the strain of Zoryu's neck reached all the way to his temple. This must have been the problem of national importance he wanted to discuss with the Avatar, but not in such a public venue. He's getting murdered. Oh yeah. Man, oof. Oof. Hold on, there's a word I don't know and I want to look it up. Malaise. Okay. A malaise has settled over the land since the death of our father, and the natural bounties we used to enjoy during his reign have vanished. Chasian explained, even though no one asked him to. Yeah, Chasian explained, even though no one asked him to. Some of the older fire sages believe the spirits of the islands themselves are unhappy and have turned their faces away from us. He smiled at Zoryu. I, of course, have argued otherwise. The strength of my brother's rule is not to be questioned. The way Zoryu clenched his teeth and looked away told Kyoshi there was an element of truth to Shaijin's claims. And likely not the part where he supported his sibling, though. Yeah, likely not the part where he supported his sibling, though. She knew what she had to do. The favor of the Avatar was the prize here, was it not? Men like Shing traveled across seas for a taste of it. Shaijin's little game of insubordination and disguise was obvious in hindsight. He wanted Kyoshi to shower respect upon him and criticize the Fire Lord. She didn't appreciate being manipulated, especially by someone she just met. She narrowed her eyes at Shaijin. If there is an issue with the spirits, I will resolve it on behalf of the Fire Lord. Her ability to communicate beyond the physical realm was sorely lacking, but he didn't need to know that right now. He has my full support as the Avatar. Now, if you don't mind, he and I will talk in private. Shaijin's mouth fell open. I believe I asked you to leave. Kyoshi said. Normally, she'd wait longer before letting the cutting remarks fly, but this was a special case. She was on. She was on to Cheijin's performance, and she wanted the bystanders to see his efforts fail to bear fruit. But instead of suffering the rebuke like Cheijin uh, glowed with happiness. I believe you did. He bowed and shuffled away, hurrying like he had to go share the news of their conversation with a friend. There wasn't the effect. That wasn't the effect she wanted. Kyoshi turned back to Zoryu. He stared at her like a gutted fish, unable to speak. Kyoshi, Kyoshi, Ranky whispered, nearly catatonic, forgetting that the ruler of her country stood within arm's reach of her. Kyoshi, what did you what did you just do? She didn't know. It took the laborious, hurried arrival of Heiran to provide an answer. What she's done is follow disaster with catastrophe, the headmistress growled when she limped her way over. Everyone shut up and follow me, before you embarrass yourselves further. Damn, I thought she did right by doing that, but I guess not. Kyoshi fell in behind Heiran. To her surprise, so did the Fire Lord. There was apparently no limit to the people Heiran could boss around. She detected pitying remarks on the faces of the nobles they passed, but they weren't aimed at her, the ignorant foreigner who'd. She detected pitying smirks on the faces of the nobles as they passed, but they weren't aimed at her, the ignorant foreigner who'd made a mess of things. They were directed at Zoryu, the man everyone here was supposed to owe absolute respect and fealty to. Whatever fluency she thought she had in court dynamics had been upended. I guess that's true. And since he's illegitimate, he could have been the Fire Lord. Because he is older than his brother, who is the Fire Lord. But he's illegitimate. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I was getting distracted in my own thoughts. Okay. Um, yeah. What fluency? Yeah, whatever fluency she thought she had in the court dynamics was being upended. She took one last glance at Shayshin, who was already whispering enthusiastically to another guest. Emblazoned on the back of the Fire Lord's brother's robe was a large stone camellia, wrought with gold, wrought with gold thread, which meant to be seen like a beacon. The rendition was identical to the one she'd seen in the portrait gallery, only without its smaller, peony rival. Ah, so that's what it means. Lord Sheiryu's portrait has a picture of the camellia and then the small peony. I think the smaller peony is supposed to resemble the Fire Lord, the now Fire Lord, and the bigger one is supposed to resemble Shayshin, his illegitimate son. Oh. Yeah, the rendition was identical to the one she'd seen in the portrait gallery, only without the smaller peony rival. A single blossom growing strong, with no competition to worry about. Yeah. Oh my god. Jesus. It's all connected. It's all connected. Yeah. A single blossom growing strong, with no competition to worry about. Kyoshi, move! Rangi whispered. They left the mass of the crowd behind, circling around the palace grounds. As large as the party was, there was still more empty garden where they could have some true privacy, instead of counting on people not to snoop. The sparseness of the flowering orchard was... Hold on. The sparseness of the flowering orchard was more attractive from ground level. The regular spacing between the Zancan cherry and the silver wisteria gave the impression of pink and white trees compressing into lines and then expanding again as their viewing angles changed. The Fire Lord moved slowly, at Hayrant's pace. The stoic, silent royal guards had been dismissed, but Atuad and Jinpa had been pulled away from the party. Kyoshi had ruined the privilege of remaining unchaperoned. Yeah, Kyoshi had ruined the privilege of remaining unchaperoned for everybody in her group. Wow, oh no, it's the other way around. Wow. Rangi muttered at Kyoshi. Wrecked. Super wrecked, man. Wow. Kyoshi, Rangi muttered at Kyoshi. She pressed her finger to her temple. Huh? If I insulted this Chaijin person, I'm sorry, Kyoshi said under her breath. But he was doing much worse, and no one called him out on him. It wasn't Chaijin you insulted. It was the Fire Lord. Rangi could see Kyoshi didn't get it. You declared in front of a crowd that you would fix a national problem for him. Isn't that my job? Yes, but you're not supposed to express it like that. The smooth running of the Fire Nation stems from the strength of the Fire Lord, both real and perceived. When you help him, you have to frame it as a partnership among equals. Simply claiming you're going to wave your hand and make it all better implies the Fire Lord is too weak to manage the country on his own. Kyoshi had the sinking feeling. Kyoshi had the sinking feeling this information was buried somewhere in the libraries at Yokia. She might have even read about this very aspect of Fire Nation culture and simply forgotten. She could try and absorb the rules of diplomacy through text, but it wasn't the same as practicing them until they were second nature. One of her past lives could have helped her with the information too, had she not been so deficient at communing. She imagined Avatar Zeto watching her blunder and hurling his hat onto the ground. And to top it off, you dismiss someone in front of Fire Lord. And to top it off, you dismiss someone in front of Lord Zoryu. Rangi said. Right of dismissal is the only custom more important than the right of introduction. She ran her head down the line of her jaw. This is Chameleon Bay all over again. You charge in face first, wreck the place, and then have to flee with your own tail between your legs. I told you minutes before to be careful, did I not? Getting chewed out by Rangi was always going to be part and parcel of their. Yeah, getting chewed out by Rangi was always going to be part and parcel of their reunion. Kyoshi just thought it would have taken longer to get around it. I'm sorry, she muttered. They weren't being as quiet as they thought. It's not the Avatar's fault, Zoryu said. It's mine. He'd come to a halt by a turtle duck pond. The animals were napping quietly on water so clear it looked like they were hovering in midair. Under a willow tree was a stone bench where Zoryu sat down, contemplating the peaceful scene. A smaller reception would have avoided this, but at the last moment I thought I needed a bigger spectacle to enhance my image. In defense of Kyoshi's first blunder, Seijin and Zoryu were nearly identical in the face, down to the same prominent brow and jut of their chin. At a distance, it would have been impossible to tell them apart, but up close, she could see the Fire Lord was thinner, still a gangly boy underneath his voluminous robes. It was as if someone had sewn two copies of the departed Lord Sheiryu, one with less stuffing. Zoryu's attempt to still his features in a regal manner was only half successful. As he gazed into the water, he smiled graciously at his reflection, like someone who would much rather be crying. This whole disaster is entirely my mistake, not Kyoshi's. Permission to speak beyond my station, Lord Zoryu, Heiran said. He waved half-heartedly. Granted, to you and everyone here. It is partially her fault, she shouted. The sudden noise woke up the ducks and caused them to scatter to the other side of the pond, quacking as they fled. Or at least you have to declare so. What kind of Fire Lord preemptively blames himself for everything? Permission or not, that seemed overly familiar of Heiran. Unless Ryu was a former private student of hers, the master-student relationship was one of the few to cut across all boundaries. You can't be that mopey little boy I used to teach anymore, Rangi's mother snapped, confirming Kyoshi's suspicion. Act with the dignity of your position. You've let Seijin walk over you far too long without repercussions, and now he thinks he can get away with anything. Kyoshi watched Shoryu wither under Heiran's scolding, and felt a painful stab of recognition. Was I like that early on? She asked Rangi in a low voice. Are you kidding me? Rangi said with a snort. And what's so funny to you, Lieutenant? Heiran turned upon her daughter. You're telling me you couldn't think of a tactic to prevent the situation, not even a basic diversion? Rangi suddenly blanched. She trembled with a fear that Kyoshi had never seen before. Not when taking on. Not when taking. Yeah. She trembled with a fear that Kyoshi had never seen before. Not when taking on a brutal Lei Tai champion without her firebending, or fighting with a monstrous Shirshu. You are responsible for the Avatar in every regard, not just physical safety. The daughter might not have the daughter might have been good at scolding, but the mother was the founder of the entire school. Her reputation reflects on yours, and tonight I overheard an Earth Kingdom man call her a Dao Fei to her face. Kyoshi and Rangi glanced at each other with eyes as wide as plates. They had kept more than a few details of their journey to themselves. That the rumors were technically true and Kyoshi really was a Dao Fei by oath was one secret they hadn't. Yeah, the rumors that yeah that the rumors were technically true, and Kyoshi really was a Dao Fei by oath was one secret they'd have to work together to keep from the headmistress, for fear of Capital Island setting ablaze. I am also to blame, Heiran muttered. I shouldn't I shouldn't have left your side, but I was distracted. She glared at Atuat, who had just finished a skewer of meat she'd taken along from the party. Hold on just 1 second. There we go. Oh. Okay, we're back to the entertainment. Okay. I am also to blame, Heiran muttered. I shouldn't have left your side, but I was distracted. She glared at Atuat, who had just finished a skewer of meat she'd taken along from the party. What? The Water Tribe doctor said, picking her teeth with the sharp silver of bamboo. I I haven't offended anyone tonight. Frankly, I found everyone else's behavior imprudent and shocking. Jinpa, ever the peacemaker, raised his hands. I am extremely I am I am extremely confused. I understand court manners are important, but why is everyone acting like the nearest volcano is about to erupt? It's because the very it's because the very problem I requested. Hold on just 1 second. Okay, there we go. Um, It's because the very problem I requested the Yeah, it's because the very problem I requested the Avatar's assistance with has now become much worse, Zoryu said. He turned to Kyoshi. I was going to explain everything under more private circumstances. Now is as good a time as any, Kyoshi said. I trust everyone here. She was willing to take a gamble on Ottawat's discretion. Zoryu rearranged his robes so they wouldn't wrinkle, conscious of them for the first time this evening. My father, the late Lord Shiryu, was renowned for his exceptional strength and prodigious prejudice. No, I'm having very trouble with this word. Hold on, I got it. Prodigious. Prodigious. Okay. My father, the late Lord Shiryu, was renowned for his exceptional strength and prodigious appetites. Shaijin is probably not my only half sibling born out of wedlock, but he's the one my father couldn't ignore completely. His mother is Lady Huazo. Yeah, his mother is Lady Huazo of the Saowan house. The Saowan are a powerful clan that controls my Inca Island in the eastern part of the country. Yeah, let me say it again. The Saowan are a powerful clan that controls Inca Island in the eastern part of the country, Rangi explained. It's both one of the most prosperous and heavily fortified territories in the nation outside the capital. Lady Huazo wasn't here tonight, but many of her relatives were. They were the ones wearing stone camellia patterns. The Sawan, the Sawan, the Sawan family crest. Based on the insignias Kyoshi had seen, the Saowan outnumbered the next two largest factions combined. What about your mother? She asked Zoryu. Where is she? My mother was Lady Sulan of the Keoso. Yeah, my mother was Lady Sulan of the Keoso clan. Yeah, Keoso clan, Zoryu said, his lips twisting into a sad smile. And I never knew her. She died giving birth to me. I'm told she was a lovely and wonderful person by all accounts. Kyoshi's throat tightened in sympathy. If royal blood couldn't shield a child from being orphaned, then what chances did the cast-offs of the world ever have? To avoid dishonoring Lady Huazo and the Saowan clan, my father officially recognized Shaijin as his child, Zoryu went on, but somehow also managed to exclude him from being an office. Oh, wow. But somehow also managed to exclude him from being an official member of the royal family. It placed my elder half-brother in an unclear position when it came to the line of succession, so he was removed from the palace. Sending him away to the fire sages was a convenient method to get rid of an embarrassment to the Fire Lord, and my father forbade the matter to be talked about at court while he was alive. He caught Kyoshi's scowl of disapproval before she could mask it. Fire lords and earth kings did worse to their siblings in ancient times, and I've attended performances of water tribe sagas with similar themes. In hindsight, in hindsight, I'd I'd have gladly taken Shaijin's end of the deal and traded ruling for solitude and study. Stop saying things like that, Heiran snapped. Weakness is practiced and learned as much as strength is. What if one of the Salwan were to hear you? Zoryu shrugged, a gesture that looked strange when performed by the leading figure of an entire country. His sturdy shoulder pads were designed for ambivalence and almost swallowed his head as they rose upward. It's too late to be worried. I set the wrong tone for Cheijin long ago. After my father's death, when I first heard the Salwan clan were sending Cheijin back to court as a high temple Lijon, I was delighted. I thought the playmate of my youth was returning, my only living blood relative. But being sent away by our father embittered him. Zoryu tapped the side of his hair, causing his headpiece to wiggle. He came at me wanting his crown. Shaishin exploited my initial lenience to show the clans how much kinglier he is than me, and has continued to do so ever since. Tonight was merely one example of a long list of petty jabs and undermining. The Salwan have always been skilled at subtly shaping public opinion, Rangi said. She spoke with the wariness of a veteran, more befitting of someone her mother's age. Kyoshi had never seen her act this way. Shaijin has plausible deniability. Hold on, just one second. Yeah, Shaijin has plausible deniability. He could say that he merely acted with the impertinence of family and wore the wrong clothes. Punishing him for it could look like an overreaction, and the Fire Lord would fall even further in esteem. This is what Shaijin does, Soryu said. He is simply better at this game than I am, and day by day he comes ever closer to fully winning it. I don't understand, Kyoshi said. So he wishes he was Fire Lord instead of you. Insults and opinions can't change the laws of succession. They can when they're backed by enough troops, Zoryu said wryly. Shaijin was telling the truth. The Fire Nation struggles, Avatar. The harvests have been borderline failures for 2 years in a row. Fishermen pull up empty nets from the shores of First Lord's Harbor, Tahanawu. We had to cull half of the pig chickens in the country due to sickness a few months ago. To most of the common folk, it appears as if my entire reign has been cursed by the spirits of the islands themselves. He rubbed the back of his neck. Another fidget made ridiculous by his outfit. Now, the noble clans might not believe in curses, but they do need renevues. But they do need renevues for their fiefdoms. Hold on. Fiefdom. Mm. Oh yeah, fiefdom. Okay, back to it. Uh, uh, um. Now, the noble clans might not believe in curses, but they do need revenues for their fiefdoms to pay their household warriors. If they can't, then I have a bunch of very angry, unemployed, highly trained fighters on my hands, suddenly willing to entertain the concept of Fire Lord Jin. If I may, Jinpa said, respect for the will of the spirits is one thing, but the misfortunes you're describing seem beyond anyone's control. How can the people of the Fire Nation lay these troubles at your feet? Zoryu snorted. With great ease. My father was an old... With great ease. My father was an unintelligent boor, but during his rule, the rains fell. The fields were green, and the fish were so plentiful you could pluck them from the seas by hand. In contrast, I've had to empty the royal treasury to keep some of the poorer islands from going hungry. The Salwan homeland of Mainka is faring relatively well these days, which gives my brother even more credibility and influence. He appears to be the son of Shiryu. He appears to be the son of Shiryu, better favored by the spirits. Kyoshi was beginning to understand. You invited me here to bolster your reputation within your own country. You are correct, Avatar. You are correct, Avatar. Granted, I don't expect you to snap your fingers and have spirits fill the barns with grain, but I thought if you stood by me in solidarity during the holiday, it might help settle some of the unrest in the palace. He made a face of longing for something going right. He made a face of longing for something going right for once. Jin hijacked my plan and outmaneuvered me yet again. You pretty much blessed his future reign, Avatar, in front of the whole court, no less. I see, Atuat interjected, tapping her chin thoughtfully as if she were the intended audience for the explanation. But you're talking about conflict like an inevitability. Yeah, but you're talking about conflict like an inevitability. Welcome to the Fire Nation, everyone, Zoryu said with a grin that was equal parts cheekiness and deep regretful sorrow. Heron shot him a look that could punch its way through a stack of shields. Zoryu coughed. What I mean to say is the history of this crown tends to repeat itself. Fire Lord Yorsar nearly lost the country to civil war, and was only saved by Fire Avatar Zeto. After a certain point, it becomes a matter of strategy over spirits, Heiran said. She stared at the pond, rolling her cane between her fingers. Yeah, after a certain point, it becomes a matter of strategy over spirits, Heiran said. She stared at the pond, rolling her cane between her fingers. In times of upheaval, every lesser clan wants to ally themselves with the eventual winners. If the Sauwon continue to wax in power and reputation, then at some point they'll have enough supporters to openly rebel against the throne. Shaijin works the courts while his mother Huazo consolidates wealth and power throughout the islands. Sorry, I just got distracted. Okay. Yeah. Heijin works the courts while his mother Huazo consolidates wealth and power throughout the islands, Zoryu said. In the meantime, I lack the political and military resources to check them. The Standing Fire Army is an elite force, but it is small. To win in pitched battle against a clan as large as the Sawan, I'd need the rest of the noble houses committed to locking in lockstep behind me. And that wouldn't happen without an extremely just cause. He puffed his cheeks in frustration. This is what I get for not wanting to spill the blood of my countrymen. I have borne the insults of Shaijin as best I could, so as not to accelerate us towards civil war. I've traded away my image in bits and pieces, trying to delay the inevitable. But in the eyes of my people, I don't know how much more honor I have left to lose. Kyoshi pondered the trap the Fire Lord lay in. Jianzhu had once complained to her that the Earth Kingdom was too big to govern properly, but its size meant it could suffer grievous injuries in one quarter and not feel them in the other. The Earth Kingdom's nature was to persist, muddling through floods, famines, bandit uprisings, and incompetent governors. The Fire Nation, on the other hand, was the right size to be transformed and consumed by its disasters. Kyoshi might not have been an expert in court politics, but she was well versed in the motions of violence and suffering. She could see the sky bison's view of war spreading across the map of the islands, and she understood how vicious a close quarters fight for power could get. Zoryu seemed fairly shrewd to Kyoshi, and decent enough at heart. It was just for one being the most powerful people in the world, he was remarkably powerless. He had been handed a title by virtue of his birth, and a map to his life where every route led directly to a dark, terrible destination. She could sympathize. We need to engineer a response, Heiran said. Shaijin went too far tonight. There is plenty of time left in the evening to show him and the rest of the guests where the line is. She spun around to march back to the party, but the sudden motion left her wobbling. Atwat grabbed her before she fell. You need rest, the doctor said gently. You're done for the night. I'll take you inside. Heiran shook her head and gripped her cane tighter. The children can't be left alone. Look what happened already. Atwat's presence seemed to explode in size. Gone was the unserious... Yeah. I have to do everything for these kids nowadays. Even the political stuff. Come on now. Atwat's presence seemed to explode in size. Gone was the unserious, diminutive, diminutive woman, and in her stead rose an, an uh, also something I can't pronounce, even though I know what it. There we go. Yeah, Atawat's presence seemed to explode in size. Gone was the unserious, diminutive woman, and in her stead rose an implacable spirit of the north inside. That's funny, she declared. I thought I heard one of my patients talking back to me on a health matter just now. It must have been the wind. Hayran glowered at her friend, but like a master waterbender, Atawat calmly rode the storm until it petered out. Finally, Hayran sighed in surrender. Fine. Monk, Atawat said. Atawat said, help me help her back. Will you? Yeah, help me help her back. Will you? Jinpa, Jinpa, acclim, Jinpa, another word that it's, it's not that I'm dumb, you guys. Jeez, what was the word again? Yeah, that's what I thought, but I'm just over guessing. I am overthinking it. Oh, so let me just give me a moment. Okay. Um, hold on. Again. There we go. Hold on. There we go. I think it's gone. I'm not sure. Hopefully it is. Okay. Actually, wait. No, it's not gone yet. There we go. uh, Junpa acclimated to taking orders from people he just met. Gently grasped. Yeah, Junpa, acclimated to taking orders from people he just met, gently grasped Heiran by the arm. He and the doctor led her back to the palace. Forget trying to rebuke Chejin for now, Heiran called over her shoulder. Don't do anything until we come up with a plan. Stick with neutral Jing. Kyoshi watched them leave, fascinated. Someone had managed to cow the headmistress, the woman whom both Rangi and the Fire Lord Zoryu feared. By this logic, Atuat, yeah, by this logic, Sifu Atuat must have answered must have answered only to the moon and ocean spirits themselves. Looks like the children are on their own, Zoryu said, rubbing his eyes. Kyoshi looked around. The sudden departure of Heiran and Atuat. The sudden departure of Heiran and Atuat had put into stark contrast the relative youth of their remaining group. Most of the nobles attending the party tonight were the same age as Reigi's mother, or older. I suppose we have to go back, Zoryu said, though I'd personally rather spend the rest of the evening reading or playing Pai Sho. Do you play Avatar? I am asked that often. She couldn't keep the note of Hold on. Another word that I have come across that I don't think I've ever heard. Come on. Okay, tetchy. It's not touchy, it's tetchy. Okay. I read way too far. I read at the end of the thing at the chapter, and holy fuck. Oof. 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 Okay. So, where was I? Jesus, the corners of my mouth is really itchy. Damn it, Mango. Yeah. I am asked that often. She couldn't keep the note of tetchiness out of her voice. Across the four nations, people equated skill at the game with wisdom. It made her feel like her lack of skill at it was a character flaw. The answer is no. Zoryu winced. I didn't mean anything by it. I became acquainted with your predecessor over the game. She had to take a moment to understand he was talking about Yoon, not Karuk. You do realize Yoon wasn't the Avatar before me, technically speaking. The corners of Zoryu's mouth turned in opposite directions. Fire sages would censure me for saying this, but in a certain way, he was Avatar enough. Master Yoon burnished my image at court and pulled more diplomatic strings for me than any of my ministers. He made me forget my station, in a good way. He had a talent for that, Rangi said. Her eyes were lost somewhere among the reflections of the pond. Ooh, this is turning awkward. Very awkward, very fast. His visits to the palace were the only time I didn't feel like I was so alone, Zoryu said. But I understand he was your friend before he was mine. My condolences to you both. The world is poor without him. Such a basic sentiment, and yet so rare. Kyoshi could count on one hand the sages in the Earth Kingdom who grieved for Yoon. I know. Hold on, I want to check something. Okay. Okay, there we go. Um, um, yeah. Kyoshi could count on one hand the sages in the Earth Kingdom who grieved for you in the person. Instead of distancing themselves from you, instead of distancing themselves from you in the mistake. Thank you, she said, her throat dying out a little. Maybe one day I can be as much of a help to you as he was. I mean, given how gravely you've insulted me tonight, there's nowhere to go but up, Zoryu said with a glare she'd realized was meant to be a wink. He and Yoon had. He and Yoon. He and Yoon even had similar senses of humor. Kyoshi relaxed for the first time tonight. By no one's standards but hers. Yeah, by no one's standards but hers. She and the Fire Lord had gotten off to a good start. I hope this doesn't turn into a fucking rash tomorrow. Because that would fucking suck. Okay, yeah, by no one's standards but hers. She and the Fire Lord had gotten off to a good start. The smile vanished from her face when she considered how to break the news to Zoryu that the Earth Kingdom's preferred version of events was a lie. She looked at Rangi, who bit her lip. Yoon being alive was too much to drop on Zoryu tonight, Kyoshi decided. Perhaps once they found more leads. There was no point in telling the Fire Lord that their friend had been swallowed up by the mainland, forgotten, until they could do something about it. The three of them walked back to the party, Rangi occasionally tugging on the back of Kyoshi's robes to make sure she followed the requisite distance behind Zoryu. There was a completeness to their formation she appreciated. She remembered Chancellor Dairin's warning about the flowers. Lord Zoryu? She said. Lord Zoryu, she said. Is the Kaosho clan sigil the winged peony by any chance? Yes, that's the symbol of my mother's family. Why do you ask? Yep. Knew it. Yep. She told him about the stencils on the portrait of his father. The Sawan's flower ascendant over the Kaosos. Zoryu wore in a manner very unbecoming of a head of state. Oh no, not wore. Zoryu swore in a manner very unbecoming of a head of state, and clawed the air like he wanted to strangle someone. Wonderful. Now the royal artists are disrespecting me, he said. Sheishin must have struck a deal with them. I'll have to replace the painters and have the images covered before any Kaosho hardliners see it and go berserk. Sheishin's other goal is to provoke someone and the Kaoso clan into committing an inexcusable act of violence against Sao Wan. Then he hold on, I want to check something real quick. Okay, I am back. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, there we go. All right. Where was I? Yeah, Shaishin's other goal is to provoke someone in the Kaoso clan into committing an inexcusable act of violence against Sao Wan. Then he has the just cause for starting a conflict. History would say he was defending his honor. Zoryu sighed. Clan rivalries have been a major impediment to the progress of the Fire Nation since its inception. My mother's side of the family despises the Sao Wan and would rather burn the country down than accept Shaishin as their ruler. Sometimes I wish I could abdicate if it weren't for the violence the Kaoso would create in my wake. Kyoshi continued to be surprised by Zoryu's frankness. He was less power hungry than some small-time He was less power hungry than some small-time mayors she'd met in the Earth Kingdom. It's a very air nomad idea, she said. Running away, following the path of negative Jing. Maybe it's a wise course. She heard the smack of Rangi's hand colliding with her own forehead. Spirits of the islands, Kyoshi, you can't just encourage the Fire Lord to abdicate. Please don't tell your mother I said that, Lieutenant, Zoryu said, suddenly and genuinely concerned. She'd beat the idea out of me. I still break in cold sweats when I think of her training programs. Kyoshi snickered. It had been a very long time since she'd It's been a very long time since she'd connected to anyone her age. It was strange to think she could It was strange to think she could relax around a smuggling gang and a ruler of the Fire Nation, but nothing in between. Sorry, let me read that again. I'm paying too much attention to my lips right now. I'm just like, man, I hope they don't get a really bad rash. Because I was going to town on that mango and like eating the mango off the peel and just like digging in, trying to get more. I really regret my decision. Very much so. Okay. Um. Uh. Yeah. Kyoshi snickered. It had been a very long time since she'd connected to anyone her age. It was strange to think that she could relax around a smuggling gang and the ruler of the Fire Nation, but nothing in between. We're getting closer to the party, Rangi lilted under her breath. So, could I please ask the two most important people I will ever serve in my life to start acting appropriately? The Avatar and the Fire Lord straightened up, neither wanting to incur her wrath. Evening had settled, and torches had been lit to cast a gentle glow over the festivities. The crowd was still dense, forming a grove of red, forming a grove of red silks over the pavilion. The only sound was the chirping of insects drifting over the warm air. A peaceful scene. A peaceful scene. Stop, Kyoshi said. It was a doubt-faced suspicion that made her come to a halt, but the feeling was strong. Something's off. What is it? Zoryu said. I don't hear anything. Rangi had noticed it too. Oh. Yeah, I totally went over my head the last line on that paragraph. The only sound was the chirping of insects drifting over the warm air. A peaceful scene. Yeah. What is it? Rizoryu said. I don't hear anything. Rangi had noticed it too. Exactly. It's too quiet. She slid in front of Kyoshi and Zoryu. The marching order the marching order of rank no longer as important as protecting her charges. The conversations that filled the air earlier had completely dried out. The nobles were standing still, silently watching them arrive. Zoryu had talked about a tipping point where he lost too many supporters and the clans turned against him. But there was no way it could have happened while they were gone. Could it? Oh, fuck, it's Caesar time. Oh no. What do you think? Yeah, but there was no way it could have happened while they were gone. Could it? Do you know what's going on here? She whispered to Zoryu. He shook his head. Oh yeah. Yep. Well, I'm not saying yep like I know what's gonna happen, but like yep like oof. Oof. Not looking good. Not looking good at all. Yeah. Do you know what's going on here? She whispered to Zoryu. He shook his head. Kyoshi advanced on her own for a better look. The men and the women of the court were angry and confused, but most of all they were utterly terrified. They stood at fearful attention, rigid like their lives depended on it. A crying waiter moved to wipe a tear, but quickly caught himself, snapping his arm back to his side. A sickening familiarity bloomed in the pit of Kyoshi's stomach. She'd seen this kind of behavior once before, when the pirate queen of the Eastern Sea had plucked Earth Kingdom natives from their villages and forced them to do their bidding upon pain of death. What's wrong with them? Soryu called over Rangi's shoulder. Why are they acting like that? They're hostages, said a familiar voice. How else are they supposed to act? Kyoshi felt her chest being squeezed by powerful, invisible jaws, sharp fangs threatening to pierce through every uh, sharp fangs threatening to pierce through in every direction. He hadn't spoken at the tea house in Chinchou. Hearing him now, after so long, was an incantation that slowed her senses. Up high, Yoon sat at the edge of the Avatar's dais, letting his feet dangle over the side. He was dressed for the occasion in fine robes of green and black, looking every bit like a secret prince out of the Earth Kingdom fables, hidden until the moment of his glorious ascension. Evil Spirit Yoon! Oh yeah, it's definitely Evil Spirit Yoon. Yeah, looking every bit like a secret prince out of the Earth Kingdom fables, hidden until the moment of his glorious ascension, except for his one hand, which was still stained a rotting gray, like a dead thing affixed to his body. Yoon beamed at her, the same easy smile she knew from her dreams and nightmares alike. It's good to see you, Q. It's good to see you again, Kyoshi. And that is the end of that chapter. Yeah, I'll read this chapter. I might read the next chapter. Who knows? We'll see. Probably not. Okay. So now the next chapter is called The Crash. So, the crash. For all her desperate wishing, Kyoshi had never considered what she would actually say to Yoon when she found him. He had been like the peak of a mountain, visible when she closed her eyes, attainable so long that as she ignored the impassable terrain in between them. Now that he was here, she was too afraid to speak. The wrong word could pierce the illusion and send him away. Hey, bud. Looking a little evil there. Wanna not? Yeah, basically like, you're looking alive, but you don't look the same. Good night. See you tomorrow morning. Hopefully I don't have a rash on my fucking face. Okay, but yes. He had been like the peak of a mountain, visible when she closed her eyes, attainable so long as she ignored the impassable terrain in between them. Now that he was here, she was too afraid to speak. The wrong word could pierce the illusion and send him flying away. And send him away. If you're wondering what I'm doing here, I have a standing invitation to attend any and all festivities of Zeto from my good friend the Fire Lord, Yoon said. He waved cheerfully at Zoryu, and then feigned disappointment at the bewildered silence he received in return. Oh, come on, Zoryu. Don't tell me the offer was rescinded simply because you thought I was dead. Yoon, Rangi said. Get down from there, now. She was both calm and stern, as if she'd caught him picking fruit from a tree he didn't own. But at the same time, she also shifted more of her body in between him and the Fire Lord. Yoon noticed the motion and gave her an unreadable smile. Hi to you too, Rangi. Let's go outside, Yoon, she said. We'll talk. He scrunched his nose. That would have been nice, but I'm afraid I've already committed to a different line of play. He pointed to a lady in a voluminous pink gown near the dais who shuddered at his attention. Madam, give a curtsy to my friends, will you? The woman sniffled and lifted the hem of her skirts. Underneath, her pink head sunk into the ground, the earth swallowing up to her ankles. Kyoshi whipped around, looking at the other guests. Their long formal robes hid their feet from under. Their long formal robes hid their feet from sight, but there were inches of bunched-up cloth puddled around every single one of them. The entire party had stepped into quicksand under the control of her friend's earthbending. You have to hand it to the Fire Nation folk, Yoon said to Kyoshi. I threatened them once and explained that if they moved or made any noise, I'd make them regret it. And you know what? They were smart enough to comply. I didn't have to make any examples out of them. Don't you just love the discipline of these people? His expression turned dark. The Earth Kingdom citizens would have blustered and yelled, How dare you! Don't you know who I am? I swear, Kyoshi, our countrymen can be so annoying sometimes. I would have just... He squeezed his hands, making a snapping, twisting motion. And there was a gesture of frustration, similar to the one Zoryu had placated earlier. Only this time, Yoon had a whole garden full of people in his grasp. The woman in pink screamed as she sank further down into the ground, up to her waist. How could he do this? Holding people hostage was a line Kyoshi thought she and Yoon shared. A distinction between them and their foes. Tagaka's slaving raid had been what provoked Yoon to confront her. Kyoshi! Rangi shouted. They'd been through enough together for Kyoshi to know exactly what Rangi was trying to communicate. Do something. Unfreeze. Now is your chance. Take him down. But her body wouldn't move with the same certainty as Rangi's. Kyoshi had to fight her paralysis simply... Let me say it again. But her body wouldn't move with the same certainty as Rangi's. Kyoshi had to fight her paralysis simply to get her fans out. While she fumbled for her weapons, Yoon leaped over her head to the ground and slipped into the frozen crowd. Kyoshi ran after him. Hold on. I need to adjust myself. I need to close this a little bit. Okay, there we go. Oh. Yeah, Kyoshi ran after him, cursing herself for such a clumsy, terrible draw. Wang would have disowned her from his operatic lineage had he witnessed it. She moved through the forest of people and felt the weight of their stares on her, some pleading with her to save them, many furiously accusing her of bringing this misery and humiliation to their door. So, Kyoshi, She spun around, swinging her closed fan with a backhand strike. Yoon evaded the blow by leaning back, using a nearby Fire Nation minister to cover the way to as cover the way a swordsman fighting a duel in a bamboo grove might use the plants as a check on his opponent's blade. Kyoshi barely halted. Yeah, Kyoshi barely halted her motion in time before he cracked. Yeah, Kyoshi barely halted her motion in time before she cracked the poor man across the mouth. Yoon glanced at her fan and then her, his eyes wide, his posture still angled. Well, this is a first of our friendship. Yeah, well, this is a first for our friendship, he said. You just tried to hurt me. She ignored the burning sting in her cheeks and thrust her weapon at his chin, but he swayed effortlessly to avoid it. She knew he received unarmed combat training from Rangi herself. She knew he had received unarmed training combat from Rangi herself, perhaps, and it showed in his decisive movements. She aimed a series of alternated. She received. She aimed a series of alternating stabs at his head and body. Really, he said, dancing with her like he'd been born a non-bending fighter. I've dealt with Jianzu for you, and this is the thanks I get. The tips of her fans waved. Yoon had earthbent a rock through Jianzu's chest, but it was Kyoshi who'd held him in place. Remember the look on his face as he died? Yoon grinned as if he were reminiscing over fire lilies instead of the time the two of them killed a man together. Oh, I'd bottle it if I could. In Chinchou, Yoon had fulfilled Kyoshi's intent. Watching him remember the deed and savor it so was like staring into a mirror that revealed her own ugliness. She couldn't escape the crinkles of Yoon's eyes, the satisfied contours of his mouth. Had she looked the same, standing in front of Jianzu's body? She noticed the Fire Navy official behind Yoon inhale deeply through his nose, seeking to aid her with a precision shot of fire from his fingers or mouth. He was trying to offer her another opening. Kyoshi made eye contact with the uniformed man and shook her head. It was too risky. She had to talk her friend down. Why are you doing this? She shouted. Tell me what it is you want. The reversion of their old roles calmed him, the servant trying to meet the master's needs. Kyoshi. I want to be evil. I want to see you lose. Basically what he's gonna say. I just want to see Kyoshi lose. Kyoshi, he said gently, I want the same gift you received. Avatarhood? The house in Yokiya? One she couldn't give? The other she cared so little about she'd volunteer to draw up a transfer deed right here and now? He saw her confusion and leaned in to clarify. Justice, Kyoshi, he whispered. I want justice. Everyone who lied to me is going to suffer the consequences. But Jianzu is already... He shook his head. Jianzu was the big. Jianzu was only the biggest name on the long list. Your mistake, Kyoshi, is that you stopped at him. My mistake is that I didn't save him for last. Yeah, my mistake is that I didn't save him for last. Yoon knelt down and placed his palm on the grass. He had tilted his head and hummed. The guards have come out and surrounded the party. Finally, I accepted faster reactions. Finally, I expected faster reactions from the Fire Nation's best. Kyoshi's eyes widened. She thought she'd been buying time, but he'd been wasting hers. The whole spectacle of trapping the court where they stood had been a distraction to empty the palace. I think it's time I paid respects to my old Sifu, Yoon said. He winked at Kyoshi and dove into the ground. The hard-packed soil swallowed him as easily as the surface of a lake. She threw herself after him, scrabbling at the hole he'd left behind. It was filled with loose, crummy castings, like a Shoeshoe's tunnel. Yoon's disappearance was the signal for general chaos to erupt. I think he's going to try and kill Heiran. It's Heiran. She's fucking dead if he gets to her. Heiran. Heiran. Nice. Good editing. Okay. Yoon's disappearance was a signal for general chaos to erupt. The nobles burst into screams, flailing and yanking at their legs, trying to free themselves. Palace guards flooded in between the rows of trapped guests. Kyoshi squeezed her way toward the edge of the gathering, shaking off the forest of hands trying to clutch onto her like a life raft. Rangi! In her panic, she nearly elbowed an angry nobleman in the face before emerging into clear once more. Rangi! In the distance, she saw Rangi hustling Zoryu into the arms of an arriving squad. The dazed Fire Lord disappeared into a phalanx of spears, into a phalanx of... Yeah, the dazed Fire Lord disappeared into a phalanx of spears and spikes. Only after Zoryu was safe inside, the formation did... Yeah, only after Zoryu was safe inside the formation did she break away and run toward Kyoshi. Where is he? Rangi scanned the roiling crowd for Yoon. Where did he go? A long list. Everyone who lied to him. During their time together in Yokia, Jianzu had filled Yoon's head with untruths about who he was and what he could do. So had someone else. Someone who demanded that he firebend. Heiran. He went inside the palace, Kyoshi yelled. Rangi, he's going after your mother! Rangi was in a blur. She nearly scorched several bystanders with the jets of flame that shot from her hands. She extended her arms behind her, using the force to boost the speed of her bounding steps. Kyoshi followed as fast as she could. There was no use telling Rangi to wait. One of them had to reach Heiran before Yoon did. They tore past startled and indignant nobles, many of whom wanted to accost the Avatar for the harrowing experience they'd been put through tonight. As they neared the palace entrance, they saw the exit of Yoon's tunnel. He'd already made it through the doors. They barreled into the hallway, scraping paint off the walls and leaving smoke trails on the floors. Ranky led Ranky led her to a section of the guest wing near the airport. Near Yeah, Ranky led her to a section of the guest wing near the portrait gallery that Kyoshi hadn't visited yet. Plainer than the Avatar's quarters, but still lavishly decorated with baubles of Fire Nation history. When they came to the room at the end, Ranky brought her hands around and blasted the door open, nearly taking it off its hinges. The force of their entrance scattered a tea set across the floor and sent Jinpa's robes flying over his head. From the smell of roasted flour in the air, he had been in the middle of serving Atuat and Heiran tea in the air nomad style, using borrowed ingredients from the palace kitchen. Atuat was the first one to stop screaming in surprise. "What is wrong with you two?" the doctor said. "You could have injured us." "Did you see him?" Rangi said. "Was he here?" "See who?" "Yoon! Yoon is here in the palace." The name didn't fall into place for the doctor. Jinpa, once he yanked the upturned layers of orange and yellow clothes off his face, looked at Kyoshi, confused that the man she'd been writing so many letters about in the Earth Kingdom was in the Fire Nation. And Heiran completely closed her eyes to wait. Kyoshi and Ranki both spun around to face the doorway. It smoked from their trail. The clamor of bells could be heard, bouncing through the hallways, signaling an intrusion. The seconds passed by like cricket snails. It occurred to Kyoshi that if Yoon didn't know the way to Heiran's room, they'd certainly left markers for him. A scorched, smashed path leading right to his targets. But the assault never arrived. They heard a prolonged screech that sounded like a bird being clumsily slaughtered. Ranki cocked her ear at the sound. That came from the portrait gallery. "Stay here," Kyoshi said. She ventured carefully into the ruined hallway and stepped as quietly as she could through the maze of corridors, using what she could remember of the displayed antiques as her landmarks. She arrived at the gallery and was greeted by the sight of Yoon standing in the middle of the vast room, holding the limp body of Liu Beifong by his robes. "The old man's got a set of lungs on him," Yoon said, taking his finger of his free hand into his ear. He dropped Liu to the floor with a thud. The sound of a head bouncing against a hard surface, wrenching a shudder from Kyoshi. "I took a wrong turn," Yoon said. "You beat me to Heiran because I took a wrong turn. Can you believe it?" Yoon's face distorted with a fury Kyoshi had never seen on him, as if losing his way in the palace was a worse experience than any he'd suffered. "I've been here before, way more times than you. That awful red room used to be mine. Funny how fate works, isn't it? But at least I got a consolation prize." He kicked Liu's body, folding it across the floor. The leader of the Beifong family had been Jianzhu Sifu, which meant he was considered Yoon's as well, by the rules of teaching lineage and deference. Did you know that without the old Coot's backing, Jianzu would have never been able to... Yeah, did you know that without the old Coot's backing, Jianzu would have never been able to declare me the Avatar? Yoon said, calmed by the act of disrespect. Liu was partly responsible for what happened to us, in his way. Ending him was good, but Heiran will be even better. It wasn't him. This couldn't be the same person. The cave he disappeared into had spit out a simulacrum, an inhuman spirit wrapped in Yoon's skin. She's Rangi's mother, Kyoshi cried. And Rangi's our friend. There are costs to this, Kyoshi. I thought you knew that. After Jianzu, I thought you understood the price of justice. He spoke with such concern, like he was comforting a victim of inevitability. A person trapped before the flood, a person trapped before the flood, the earthquake. You should take Rangi away, so she doesn't have to watch her mother die. I plan on finishing my business in the Fire Nation before the end of the festival. It's your choice if the two of you are here for it. Kyoshi heard footsteps clattering from the other end of the gallery. Chancellor Dairin had rallied a contingent of guards, blocking off the far exit. From the way his eyes darted to the walls, his first priority was the safety of... Yeah, from the way his eyes darted to the walls, his first priority was the safety of the paintings, not the well-being of anyone near them. Not the well-being of anyone near them. One of the soldiers stepped forward to launch a barrage. Of fire fists. No! Dairon screamed, hurling himself over the woman's arms. No flames! Yoon stood trapped between the Avatar and the palace guard. Stand down! Stand down! The squad captain shouted at him. You're surrounded and you have nothing to bend with. He glanced at Kyoshi one last time before his face layered itself back into the public figure, the charmer, the showman. He held up his hands for his new audience. As a matter of fact, I do. Yoon beckoned with his fingers, and on one side of the gallery, the fire avatars began to dissolve. The crowns of their heads dripped down the walls, leaving clear wooden backings behind. The brilliant colors of the portraits bled away from their stencil. Yeah, the brilliant colors of the portraits bled away from their stencils like wax thrown onto a bonfire, and pooled into indistinguishable clumps of reddish brown that floated through the air into Yoon's waiting hands. The pigment in the paint, Yoon explained. It's usually made of ground-up rocks. No! Dairon screamed, his fears coming to light in a way he could have never imagined. No, no, no! The guards behind him froze, stricken. Paint bending? Paint bending. Never heard of paint bending, but that's pretty cool. The guards behind him froze, stricken with horror at what they were witnessing. This was an assault on something deeper than their own lives. As if bolstered by his celebration, mighty Avatar Zeto resisted the longest, but he too fell. The painting of his hat running down his long face, merging with the dark colors of his shoulders, then his waist, then his knees. His great stone stamp flanked away into cinnabar dust, joining the growing mass of pigment hovering under Yoon's control. One side of the gallery was now completely blank. Instead of the wise faces of their avatars, the portraits of the Fire Lords stared at an empty wall. Yoon held the finest work in the Fire Nation in a defiled, roiling blob above his head, and then, like a gleeful child permitted to break a jar, he hurled it on the floor. The pigment exploded in a storm of hardened pellets and sharp fragments and blinding mist. Kyoshi managed to shield her eyes before flying shards embedded themselves into her forearms. Good thing she wore her fighting armor. Yeah, Kyoshi managed to shield her eyes before flying shards embedded themselves in her forearms. A chunk of paint hit her so hard in the midsection that it knocked her on her back. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Uh, a chunk of paint hit her so hard in the midsection that it knocked her on her feet and snapped a patch of links in her chainmail. Metal pouring out of her like spilled gets. Her windless gaps did nothing but coat her mouth with red dust. By the time the blurriness of her vision cleared, the vapors were gone from the paint. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, by the time the blurriness in her vision cleared and the vapors of the paint explosion subsided, Yoon was gone. And that is the end of that chapter. I could read this next chapter, and then this next chapter is pretty long. Uh, I'm like, should I read this next chapter? Hold on. Sure, I'll read the next chapter. Hold on. Let me just, my laptop is looking a little low in health. Okay. So, the next chapter is called The Aftermath. Alright. The Aftermath. Excuse me. The voices around her merged into a whirlpool of indistinguishable noise. Kyoshi crawled her way toward the moans of the wounded on the other side of the room, dragging trails through the dark powder coating the floor. The palace guards had been wearing armor, but mainly ceremonial pieces. She saw lacerated faces, the telltale clutching of broken ribs, and those were the lucky ones, like her. Some of them weren't moving at all. Chancellor Dyren had been completely unprotected. She found his body peppered with tiny holes, each one welling with blood. She tried to staunch his wounds with her hands, but couldn't cover them all. She had no water to even attempt healing him. More guards poured in from every side, shouting in confusion. Yoon must have already escaped their encirclement. Kyoshi heard more than a few wails of anguish from the hardened fighters at the damage to their culture and history. Out of the way, she heard Atuat bellow. Give me space! The Water Tribe doctor slid to her knees beside Kyoshi. Instead of pulling out water from the skin at her hip, she prodded the fallen guards around Kyoshi with her bare hands, examining each one in turn for only the briefest of moments before moving on to the next. Why aren't you helping them? Kyoshi yelled, her hands still pressed into Dairen's torso. There's too many wounded. I have to triage who can be saved and who can't. The Chancellor is dying! Atuat took one look at Dairen. He's already gone, she said with such dismissive neutrality that it made Kyoshi think she was staring at Tigwai, the assassin himself. Don't waste your time on him. Kyoshi had read the woman completely wrong. She'd assumed the great doctor would fight for every breath of every victim. Atuat's friendship with Heiran made it seem like feeling emotions for those who healed was the key to their health. But here, she was clinically prioritizing, deciding fates quicker than she'd chosen what to drink at the party. Kyoshi took her hands off Dairen's motionless body, his robe sticking to her palms from the blood. She didn't know what blessings Fire Nationals gave to the dead. She hoped her whispered apology to the poor man would do. Atuat unslung her water skin and tossed it at her. If you know any healing, do what you can for the living. For the living. The doctor placed her hands over the chest of the unconscious guard she was examining. The air around them went cold enough that Kyoshi's flesh prickled. What are you doing? What are you doing? Kyoshi asked, fighting off a shiver. Hold on, I just need to check something real quick. Where was I? Oh yeah, there we go. What are you doing? Kyoshi asked, fighting off a shiver. Lowering his temperature. Atuat's temples pulsed in concentration. It slows every process of the body down, including death. But if I don't stop at the exact right time, his fluids will turn to ice and destroy his own organs from the inside out. After a few chilling sweeps of her hand, she shifted over to the next guard and began the process anew. I've never heard of such a technique, Kyoshi said. Freezing liquids into solids was a basic skill of waterbending. Even she could do it by now. But she never considered the subtleties that lay in between water and ice. Not the blurring lines between the elements inside and outside of a person's body. That's because it requires too much raw power for most benders, and not damaging anyone with such power takes too much control. Misuse the technique, apply force in the slightest excess, and it kills. So perhaps you should shut up and let me focus. Kyoshi took the water from the skin and worked on who she could. She mostly knew how to stop bleeding and pop joints back in their sockets, but and there was enough, and there was call enough, and there was call enough in the room for her simple skills. As she healed the superficial injuries and glanced at the ruined fire avatar wall, a single thought pounded through her head. It wasn't you who did this. It couldn't be. If she wasn't sure before, the heartlessness toward Rangi and Heiran, the wanton vandalism, the offhanded slaughter of Lu and Chancellor Dairen made her certain now. This was the work of the spirit. The foul, glowing apparition who identified her as the Avatar and dragged Yoon into the darkness of a mountain had seized his mind. No one could go through that kind of experience unchanged. The Yoon she knew would never be so cruel and destructive. Atuat finished chilling the last of the victims she deemed savable. She swatted the leg of a nearby guard. Take them to the hospital, warned, but be careful, she demanded. They're not actually healed yet, but your surgeons can start working on them now. I'll be there to help soon. Kyoshi only had one question for the woman. Can you teach me this technique? Saving lives, pulling people back from the dead, from the brink of death. There was no worthier use of bending, in her opinion. Just the ability to keep someone stable until a real doctor arrived could have made such a difference in her past. Atuat snorted in derision. At first, Kyoshi thought she might have accidentally belittled how much study it took, but it turned out Atuat viewed it from a different angle. When it comes to healing, I can teach anyone anything in the fraction of the time it normally takes, she said. Whether I have a student of the right qualities is a different matter. They got to their feet, only to see the leader of Zoryu's personal security detail waiting for the Avatar. The armored man's face roiled with bottled, silent anger, as if he'd been handpicked to represent the outrage of an entire nation. Only his duty kept him from bursting at the seams. We can talk about it later, Atuat muttered to Kyoshi. I think you have more pressing matters at the moment. Kyoshi followed the guard captain through the palace. They passed a torrent of furious nobles heading in the opposite direction. A crowd that had been recently dismissed from an unsatisfactory meeting. The courtiers, who had taken so much care in their order of speech during the party, muttered and hissed to themselves about never having been so humiliated, and the child being disgraced to the crown. Some of the most livid men and women wore the winged peony, which meant they were from Kaoso, the same clan as Zoryu's mother. The captain stopped at a set of massive bronze doors and indicated he wasn't allowed to go further. Where are my companions? Kyoshi asked. The lieutenant and the headmistress? The lieutenant and the headmistress. She had a feeling she'd need the guidance of fire nationalists for what came next. Coordinating the palace lockdown, came the gruff reply. Being useful, unlike you, was the additional silent commentary. Let me just adjust myself. Yeah. Being useful, unlike you, was the additional silent commentary. Kyoshi pushed the doors open herself, revealing the throne room, the same place where the Fire Lord received his war council. The ceiling of the great hall was supported by 4 towering red pillars, with dragons painted gold spiraling around them to the heavens. In the back, up the series of steps, lay the throne of the Fire Nation, a flat, blocky platform that would have given the sitter a little comfort. That would have given the sitter little comfort. A giant sculpted dragon weaving through the coil of its own body hung over it, threatening to burst from the wall. She guessed that if she peeked under the red silk carpet that covered the entire third of the floor, she might yet find more dragons staring back. A straggling minister sidestepped his way past her, the last remnant of an audience she'd missed. It was the man she'd nearly struck with her fan. He glared at Kyoshi and stormed out, leaving her in the throne room with only 2 other people, the Fire Lord and his brother. It was not a good moment for a stranger to walk in on. It was not a good moment for a stranger to walk in on. Zoryu was ashen and stooped, his eyes half shut, as if the light were causing him pain. Cheijin stood tall by his side, regal and calm. Where was I? Yeah. Shaishin stood tall by his side, regal and calm. An artist capturing the scene could have easily gotten their subjects mixed. She waited for Zoryu to dismiss Cheijin, but the order never came. He's alive? The Fire Lord said once the doors were closed. Yun was alive and not a single member of your country thought to tell me? Did everyone in the Earth Kingdom decide to ignore this fact together? He didn't know how right he was, and Kyoshi was to blame more than any Earth sage. She couldn't bring herself to answer. Why would he do this? Zoryu's cry was directed at the skybound spirits as much as Kyoshi. Why? He was attacking the people who wronged him. Vengeance! Yep. He was attacking the people who wronged him, she whispered. Liu Beifeng, Heiran, the people who told him he was the Avatar. Vengeance sounded so alien a reason, coming from her lips, even though she knew exactly the depth and shape it could take. I was briefed on what happened in the gallery, Zoryu said. How many are dead? Kyoshi forced herself to remember how many bodies Atuat pointedly ignored on the floor. Liu, Chancellor Dairen, 2 guards, possibly more, depending if they make it through the night. Zoryu slumped in the corner of his throne. The act made him look like a child. The act made him look like a child trying to hide from getting called in on a classroom. Called in a classroom. The mantle of being the Fire Lord was too heavy for him right now. The Chancellor didn't deserve this, he muttered. None of them did. Chejin reacted to the list of casualties much differently. This is terrible, he said, rubbing his chin with exaggerated strokes. A high-ranking official in the Fire Nation killed in the palace? A foreign dignitary under the Fire Lord's hospitality murdered? Not to mention the destruction of our cultural heritage and the humiliation of the entire court and the garden. The disgraces of our country keep mounting. I can't imagine what would happen if the intruder had successfully assassinated the headmistress of the Royal Academy. Kyoshi noticed he didn't count the fallen guards. She'd had enough of trying by decorum. What exactly are you doing here? She snapped at Chejin. Representing the voice of the fire sages in response to this heinous assault upon our nation, he replied. If I can get a word in for the Saowon clan as well, then so be it. Chejin stepped down from the stairs leading to the throne. He probably shouldn't have been standing on them in the first place. I'd be lying to my Fire Lord if I claimed to see the way. Yeah, I'd be lying to my Fire Lord if I claimed to see a way out of this disaster. We've been gravely dishonored as a people. There are calls for retaliation against the Earth Kingdom. The Earth Kingdom. She was going to say the Earth Kingdom wasn't responsible, but couldn't finish the sentence. The Earth Kingdom didn't send you to harm your country. I know. Kindness oozed from Chejin's every word. I spent the last 20 minutes assuring the court, our friends across the sea. Yeah, I spent the last 20 minutes assuring the court our friends across the sea are not to blame. It took some doing, but I've convinced them. He had no need to lie. If everything she heard tonight was true, it benefited Chejin to direct the court's anger at the Fire Lord, and not at a foreign power. And it should have been Zoryu doing the diplomatic work. Kyoshi looked to the Fire Lord, but Chejin's presence had compressed him into a younger sibling and nothing but, unable to speak over his elder. The enraged Kyoso were likely angry about Chejin taking charge of the situation. Fire Lord, may I speak to your brother alone? She asked. She had only just arrived, but it was clear she wasn't going to get anything useful from Zoryu right now. His head bobbed in an indiscernible direction. Zoryu! Chejin crooned, like he was singing his younger brother to sleep. May we be dismissed? A feeble wave. Good enough. Kyoshi slipped through the heavy doors and Chejin joined her outside. I'm sorry you had to see that, Chejin said. He looked down the long hallway to confirm it was empty. My little brother is not the best under pressure. Kyoshi examined his face. I still can't get over how much the two of you look like for not being from the uh, I still can't get over how much the two of you look alike for not being from the same mother. I've been told I could serve as his political decoy. We still have those here in the Fire Nation, you know. The Fire Army keeps tabs on random villagers who resemble important figures. I don't think any of them have pulled into service in the last century, though. Zoryu has not impressed me so far, Kyoshi said. Maybe he should be your decoy instead of you his. Shayshin's brow lifted at the implication. In truth, I fear for him, he said carefully. If he can't bring the perpetrator to justice swiftly, the clans will no longer consider him fit to be the Fire Lord. What would happen then? He'd be replaced. Shayshin paused to gauge her reaction before continuing. I have no idea with whom, mind you, but no Fire Lord in history has ever left the throne and lived very long afterward. Kyoshi nodded slowly. Who's to say that wouldn't be for the best? No one wants loose ends lying around. A single, unopposed, popular ruler would be much better for the Fire Nation. She leaned in and whispered into his ear. I know what I said at the party, but really, the Avatar works with whoever wears the crown. It doesn't have to be a weakling like Zoryu. Shayshin grinned. It sounds like I can count on you. Shayshin grinned. It sounds like I can count on your backing should the worst come to pass. It did sound like that. Answer me this, Kyoshi said. Once you're Fire Lord, what will you do about your country's fortunes? His smile faltered. I'm sorry? What will you do? You told me yourself how much trouble the Fire Nation is in. What actions will you take to help your people? Shayshin shrugged. I'll think of something. I'm sure once a real ruler sits upon the throne, our people's problems will resolve themselves. I see. So, you'll be better than your brother, and the natural order of things will be restored on their own. Yes, exactly. He delighted in her understanding. Avatar, I am correcting a mistake. This country is mine by rights, no matter what my father twisted the law into declaring. I will get what is owed to me, and if a little blood must flow, then so it... I will get what is owed to me, and if a little blood must flow, then so be it. The remnants of Chajin's grin melted away. His eyes narrowed. Avatar, are you playing me right now? Playing? No. I was forming an opinion. The court intrigue of the Fire Nation might have been too complex for her to navigate perfectly, but judging character was simpler. In Chajin, she saw a man who wanted power for its own sake, and was willing to burn his own country to get it. How utterly familiar. You know what to do with such men, cackled Lagu. It upset her to no end that she could imagine his whispers better than she could hear the voices of her previous lives. She wasn't going to weed out a dignitary of a foreign nation like her former Sifu might have wanted. But she was going to do everything in her power to prevent an entitled, short-sighted man from instigating a civil war for his own benefit. It was her duty as the Avatar. Shaishin sensed her resolve hardening. Which side was she coming down on? Nothing I've said to you will hold up at court or in court. Report me and it will be your word against mine. You're the Avatar, but you're an outsider. I know. I'll get more on you eventually. He frowned at her directness. Mark my words. The attack upon the palace will lead to Zoryu's downfall if it goes unanswered. Support my brother if you must. It will only delay the inevitable. Not even the Avatar can fight history. Kyoshi turned and walked down the hall. We have a saying in the Fire Nation. Shaishin called after her. Dishonor is like a bird in flight. It has to land somewhere. It was as she expected, then. Peace in the Fire Nation, protecting Heiran. All of it pivoted around a single axis. You. Oh yeah, you love the political stuff. Yeah. It was as expected then. Peace in the Fire Nation, protecting Heiran. All of it pivoted around a single axis. You. And that is the end of that chapter. Thank God. Okay. Burping so much burping. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time, or you will hear from me next time. Bye-bye.